I came across this story on an Instagram story, and I had to talk about it because this is like, is watch, rinse, repeat. It's the same thing over and over again. And this right here further proves that systemic racism is here to stay, unfortunately, until something drastic happens and it just, fizzles out on its own. Because this is something I truly believe that is going to have to fade into obscurity if it really wants to go away. But let's be real here. This establishment we live in is not going to leave quietly. It's going to be very loud. But this right here is proof of more systematic or systemic, however you want to call it, racism, where a system can do something like this to someone like the person I'm about to talk about. This man's name is Walter Forbes. He is currently, I believe, 67 years of age and has been in jail since 1983. He's out now. He just got out. And guess what? Same old thing. He was in jail for a crime he did not commit. Apparently back in the 80s, I think like in 1982, there was a fire that occurred. And some witnesses lied and said he was the one who did it. And he went to jail for nearly 4 decades. That's almost 40 years. So you got to think, he's like 67 now. I believe that's how old he is. I'll find out if they mention it in the article. So he's been in there since he was in his 20s. Let me make sure I got my math correct. Yeah, maybe since his early 20s. He lost all of his youthful years behind a lie. And guess what? The witness who admitted to lying, is still, they're alive. Clearly, they're still alive. They need to be in jail. I don't care how old that person is. And I bet you they're palm colored. This only happens with us. Every time I hear a story about a black person, especially a black man getting out of jail after so many years there and they admit to lying, it usually is always a black person or a black man who was on the receiving end of that. Every single time, no matter what it is. It could be a robbery. It could be an arson like this. It could be murder, attempted murder, rape, sexual assault, any type of crime. And it could be even low-level crime. And it's the same thing over and over again. I've done so many of these type of stories over the years. It's not even funny. And the thing is, they can compensate this man all they want, but he's not going to get that time back. I've always said on my channel, and I say it offline, time is one of the most precious things you can ever get because it's something you never get back. I just lost 5 minutes before doing this video. I'm not going to get that 5 minutes back, nor do I want it. But see, this guy cannot go back in time and recreate and relive his youth. It's gone. All his youth got spent in prison behind some lie. And money cannot change that, no matter how much they're willing to compensate him. And that's another thing. They usually don't even compensate them that much. I think he should get $1 million for every year he spent in prison. That's what I've always said. When they comes to something like that, they should get $1 million for every year they spent in jail, tax free. Because you know that they hit you with them taxes, you ain't gonna get that. You ain't gonna get that money, at least all of it. But let me read this article. Walter Forbes was a full-time student at Michigan's Jackson Community College in 1982. He had dreams of owning a real estate development firm after graduating. One night that year, Forbes broke up a bar fight. He didn't know that would change his life forever. A man involved in the bar fight shot Forbes the next day, according to court documents. The damage the gunshot did to Forbes' body may have taken a few months to heal, but what happened next led to him spending nearly 4 decades in prison, leaving deep, lifelong wounds on him and his family. The man who shot Forbes, Dennis Hall, died in his apartment in Jackson, Michigan, in a fire that appeared to be deliberately set on July 12, 1982. So basically what happened was the person who shot this, Walter Forbes died in a fire, and basically they're accusing him of the one who did it in retaliation. Meanwhile, he's the one that got shot. Maybe this person whose apartment was caught on fire had beef with other people that wanted him dead. Because Hall and Forbes were recently involved in an altercation, police considered Forbes a suspect in the arson. Police arrested him at his home. Forbes was convicted of arson and murder in May 1983 and was sentenced to life in prison. Forbes, now 63, became a free man on November 20th, 2020, more than 37 years following his conviction, after the prosecution star witness admitted to fabricating her story, of course. And evidence surfaced that the fire may have been part of an insurance fraud scheme orchestrated by apartment building owner, leading to a retrial according to documents filed in Jackson County Circuit Court. It felt like all the possibilities that I was working on all those years were coming to fruition, Forbes said when the truth was coming to light. I didn't think it would take that long, but patience paid off. Key evidence used to implicate Forbes was witness testimony from a woman, Anis Kanebru, she sounds palm-colored, who said she saw 3 men, including Forbes, burn down the century-old 2-story house turned apartment in Jackson. Kanebru's testimony contained discrepancies, leading one of the 3 men to have charges against him dismissed after he passed the polygraph test, and the other to be acquitted, according to court documents. So she basically lied on all these men. I want to know, what was the demographic, the ethnicity of those other 2 men? Because they said that one took a polygraph test, passed it. The other one, he was just had the charges dismissed. Now, how did they keep the charges attached to him, and that wasn't true either? They probably figured, well, we got to get one of them. That was probably what was going through their head. We got to get one of them. We can't let them all go free. Forbes was the only one convicted, likely because of the tension between him and the victim, his attorney said, so they ran with that. Forbes and his attorney said that the burden of proof was placed on Forbes, that the jury saw him as guilty until he could prove himself innocent from the minute the trial began. Basically, he didn't stand a chance. Merely being arrested and charged suggests to the jury that something happened, even though they should be scrutinizing the evidence and presuming innocence. Forbes attorney Imran Syed of the Michigan Innocence Clinic told the Detroit Free Press, part of the USA Today network, no jury wants to believe that a prosecutor went through the trouble of bringing someone to trial if they're truly innocent. Kanebru admitted in 2017 that she had lied, that she never saw Forbes at the scene of the fire. After a judge granted an evidentiary hearing in February 2020, Kanebru testified that she had falsely implicated Mr. Forbes because she had been intimidated into doing so by 2 local men who knew her from around the neighborhood and who had threatened to harm her and her family if she did not implicate Mr. Forbes. So let's just go with her story and say that her story is true. That part about her being intimidated by these 2 men. What did they have against Walter Forbes? Were they the ones that had an issue with the guy he also had an issue with? Were they the ones that set the house on fire? Because if what she said, right, but see, I can only take hers with a grain of salt because she lied. Who knows if she came up with that who knows if she's lying about that? But let's just play devil's advocate. Let's say she's telling the truth about her new story. Who were those 2 guys? Those would be my next question. Who were those 2 guys that threatened to harm you and your family if you didn't say he did it? And I'm willing to bet their ethnicities are the same ones as hers. Even though it took forever, I'm still grateful she did the right thing, that she did finally tell the truth, Forbes said. Kanebru, whose last name was Gibson in 1982, did not return messages from the Free Press. I bet she didn't. A witness who knowingly lied under oath could be charged with perjury, but the statute of limitations for the crime is generally 6 years, Syed said. A perjury charge in this case can be dangerous and counterproductive, he added. We want people who lie to come forward, he said. The community as a whole is harmed if their lives remain hidden forever. Bump that. They need to keep the statute of limitations on something like that permanently ongoing. This man lost his entire youth in prison, his 20s, his 30s, 40s, and 50s behind a lie. That should mean something, but in America that don't mean nothing. As for the alleged arson for insurance money scheme, the apartment building's owner David Jones was convicted in a separate arson conspiracy scheme in Livingston County, Michigan, in 1990. A man died in a Livingston County fire as well, court documents say, and the 2 people who admitted to conspiring with Jones to burn the building down in 1990 told police that they were aware of Jones's role in the 1982 fire in Jackson. There it is. Jones received over $50,000 in insurance money for the Jackson fire, far above market value for the building. He had bought the property more than 8 years before the fire, but only insured it about 2 months before the fire, according to court documents that cited reports from the fire investigator on the case. And you know what's so crazy? People to this day still do that. They will ruin their own businesses to collect the money. The only thing is he burnt down his apartment complex and this person was in it. But because Walter Forbes and this guy who died in that fire had an altercation prior to that, they automatically assumed that he was the one that did it. So, like I said, this guy really did not stand a chance against this at all. He was up against a lie against this white woman. Then he was up against this person who owned this building, who most likely was the one that started that fire or was involved. Jones died a few years before the Michigan Innocence Clinic took on Forbes' case in 2010. Now look at how long it took before someone or a group took on his case. In 2010. He cannot criminally charge posthumously. I don't hold contempt for the people who lied to convict me, Forbes said. The reason is selfish. I wasn't going to allow them to destroy me. If I didn't forgive, it wouldn't be detrimental to them. It would be detrimental to me. Oh, God. Why did you have to go with the whole forgiveness route? This person lied on you and put you away for so many years. I don't know why black people do this. I really don't. Forbes is a man of few words. He takes his time to process questions directed toward him and concisely responds in his low-pitched, soothing voice. He recoiled when asked about his faith in the American justice system. Calling it the justice system gives a false impression. Just using the term justice gives you the sense that it is just a system, Forbes said. Black people make up about 13% of the U.S. population, but account for about half of all exonerations and 54% of homicide exonerations since 1989. You're talking 31 years. So when you think about palm color bringing the stat 13%, this and the 50% of the crimes, a lot of the times they're innocent and they fall into the category like Walter Forbes and so many other black people, especially a lot of black men. But of course, you know, they don't care about that. They just say, oh, they're in jail. They must have did something wrong. Up until I was convicted, I thought the system would work, that it would correct itself. In hindsight, I was naive. Forbes' manner isn't one of someone who is spiteful. Rather, it's of a man who's worked to find inner peace. He spoke about a few things that helped him get through the over 13,000 days and nights in prison. He would wake up in the middle of the night at 2 or 3 a.m. and meditate. I always knew what the end result was going to be, but I had no clue what I had to go through or who was going to be of help along the way. Forbes said, surest thing I knew was I had to keep moving forward. And it wasn't until November he realized it was actually happening, that he was going to be a free man and that his name would be cleared. Forbes spoke with his family often while in prison, sometimes weekly, sometimes several times a day. He knew that he would have a support system once released, and that gave him comfort. Seeing my family for the first time, it was one of those moments where all you can do is grin. Forbes is currently staying with family in Metro Detroit and plans on visiting his mom, who is 94, in Mississippi in the coming weeks. Well, that's dope that his mother is still alive. He had planned to see his mother right away, but thought it would be best to do what he had done for the past 4 decades, patiently wait, in this case, for COVID-19 infection rates to decrease. Forbes is now the patriarch of a family that had been missing one, his relatives said. His wisdom and insight is revered. He's been able to bring a lot of our families together already. Family I didn't know before. Forbes' nephew, Emil Forbes, age 40, said, we're now getting together and creating a strong bond. We needed him out here for us to come together like that. Forbes' biological son, Renaco Forbes, age 42, hadn't gotten to know his father until he was 13. Renaco was adopted. He didn't fully comprehend where Forbes was and why until meeting him as a teenager. Renaco recounted meeting his dad for the first time. There were a lot of people in the visiting room. I remember looking over my shoulder, seeing him and knowing that he was my dad. I had never seen a picture of him before, but in my heart I just knew that it was him. He finally came up to me and hugged me. I knew I was right. He said he loved his father before he had ever met him, and that once he understood the situation and knew that his father was innocent, he grew angry. I can't pretend like there wasn't a lot of bitterness I had toward the world, he said, but I try to go more off of his demeanor. He's more patient than me. He would never say couldn't or can't. Forbes' first order of business as a free man is become independent with the help of his family and adjust to a world much different than the one he knew before being locked up. Readjusting won't be seamless, Forbes said. For instance, a piece of technology so essential to our daily lives hadn't existed before his conviction. Forbes laughed when talking about smartphones. I might spend half an hour figuring out what takes someone else 20 seconds. He said, I'll be missing calls because the phone be acting up on me and I don't know how to operate it yet. You know, as crazy as how light he's making of talking about the smartphone and how to use it, and how it says it will take him a while or a few minutes to grasp what it would take someone else 20 seconds to do, is actually sad, because when he went into prison in 1983, there was no smartphones, there was no internet, there was no anything that we are doing in the last 5 to 10 years. There was nothing there, and he missed out on all of that. Like, all of that passed him by, because when you're in jail and time passes, it's like everyone else on the outside world is moving and you're stuck in that spot of, unconsciously, he was still stuck in 1982. Sure, he knows the years have gone past, but as a free man, he was stuck in 1982. That was the last time he really saw freedom. I don't really count 1983 because he was most likely already in custody before he was actually put into jail. And you got to think, he's now technically a free man in 2020. He's missed out on so much of the outside world because all he knew was inside of those prison walls. And they don't get much in there. They say 3 hots and a cot, and they mean just that. He reflects on his time in prison when he would hear people's problems in the outside world and wish his problems were as trivial. The challenges of readjusting to life outside of prison, I see it as a part of the process. I recognize what I can control and can't. And when I do see challenges, I don't stress and I try to find a solution to them. Forbes is more focused on the luxuries absent in prison that he can now access. A lot of things you don't realize you missed because they just faded away. Once somewhat adjusted, Forbes wants to be an entrepreneur collaborating with friends on their existing companies. He's especially interested in construction. Chiefly, he said, he wants to ease suffering in the world and spread good where he can. I'm still trying to figure out the most effective way to help others. Forbes said upon his release, his thoughts were directed toward the prisoners of Ken Ross Correctional Facility, the last of about a dozen facilities he was in prison at, and whereas of December 4th, there were over 1,000 active positive virus cases, according to Michigan Department of Corrections data. Michigan in 2016 passed a law that allows wrongfully convicted people to receive $50,000 for each year they were in prison. That's not nearly enough. Having been convicted for 37 years, Forbes is entitled to nearly $2 million in compensation from the state, but the money won't come for months, Syed, his attorney, said. Forbes said the wrongfully convicted must keep a positive mindset and remain motivated to uncover the truth. Work harder on your case than anyone else, he said. You have to be the driving force behind your own liberation. Now look at that. It says they passed a law in 2016, which was 4 short years ago, that they could receive $50,000 for every year they were convicted wrongfully. Like I said, $50,000 a year for every year is not enough. Because you got to think, he's only getting $2 million out of a damn near 40-year bid. And then if they got it, and then they say he's not getting it right away, and they might tax it. So will he actually get all of it? And where's that money coming from? Most likely the taxpayers. And then before they even did this, that means if you fell into the category and was released after being wrongfully convicted before 2016, before that law passed, you probably didn't get anything if you were in the state of Michigan, which means you lost your time and you don't get compensated. And this is the system that they want us to believe so wholeheartedly in. This is the system they want us to trust and to love and to hold dearly to our soul and to our hearts. Get the fuck out of here with that bullshit. However, I am glad that this man, he's finally out of prison. The person who was responsible for something should definitely happen to her. But since the statute of limitations already has dried up, I'm surprised they put the woman's name in the article, because they could have kept her anonymous. But something just told me it was a PC woman who did it. I just had the strongest feeling it was, and that name pretty much told it all for me. But this is the reality a lot of black people, especially a lot of black men, face in America today. And there are more Walter Forbes in prison right now as we speak, trying and fighting for their freedom. It's like we always have to walk on eggshells and walk that fine line just to not even have someone look at us in a suspicious way. And this guy had nothing to do with the crime, and he lost 37 years of his life behind it. But I'm glad that he's in the stage of repair and that he has a support system that's going to help guide him to do that, because he's going to need that assistance. He's going to need that help. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this story down in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you in the next one.